3 Christians take on 3 Muslims on the Islamic dilemma. The debate is finally here. Now, we know that this caused a lot of chaos because the Muslims actually already posted the video. And it got some views. But like I told y'all before, it was going to drop today. And it did. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like button so this video can go out into the algorithm to people just like you, and it can help this channel grow. So, let's see. I'm going to find it right quick.
Welcome to the Islamic dilemma. That's the point.
All right. Found the video. It actually got 38,000 views. So, that's good. All right. So let's take it to the live scene. All right, so we are here, and I'm going to review just some of it. I don't know how much. I'm really short on time. So we're just going to look at some of this, and we're probably going to like react to the rest of it later or so. But let's check it out.
You're making the point for us.
Pull it up.
No, I'm going to show.
Why not?
You're a fool. I'll tell you why.
Oh, I'm a fool.
Anytime you do this, you just keep telling us the Quran is wrong when it says it's clear.
Bro, I'm walking
I
out.
said,
Yeah.
You said he says that, and I have an explicit quotation where he does not say that. So if you can show me where he says that, please show me.
You're incapable of answering straight away. Please stop.
You guys just didn't accept this, and you went to scholars instead. You went back to scholars. Oh, let's just quote some.
The quality. What is wrong with the quality of the video? Oh my gosh. It was bad.
Other scholars now instead of Allah when you were Team Allah a second ago.
You just shot yourself in the foot. So again, here, and let me just make the point because you're not going to answer like straight away. Here's the point. The point is the Quran the final revelation?
Oh, okay. That part was just okay. They should have made that other part high quality too. But all right.
Of God.
Beautiful.
We
Wait,
say no. It is not the final revelation.
The final.
Scholars instead. You went back to scholars. Oh, let's just.
We say,
What a question was?
say-
I forgot.
we say no.
Bro.
The final revelation. I'm not going to answer like straight away. Here's the point. The point is
All right, there we go.
the Quran the final revelation of God?
Beautiful.
We say no. It is not the final revelation of God. It has so much incoherence in it that we cannot trust it. It's clearly comes from human origin. The biggest reason we would say is clearly going to be the Islamic dilemma. The Quran constantly, in dozens upon dozens of verses, confirms our scriptures, the scriptures that we have that are between our hands over and over again. Therefore, it's confirming scriptures that it contradicts. So either, this is what we call the Islamic dilemma. If we have the scriptures from God, then we have to judge Islam as false because our scriptures contradict the Quran. If our scriptures have been corrupted, well, then the Quran is confirming corrupted scriptures. So it cannot be the final revelation from God.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's good. So we would say that the basic response or the basic way to get around this is that we affirm as Muslims that the Quran generally confirms the previous scriptures. We wouldn't say that it's an absolute confirmation of every specific doctrine that you guys would hold to. And the main reason we would say to this is because the author of the Quran seems to be familiar with the Jewish Christian scriptures. And while doing so, he edits parts that he doesn't find to be in line with his Christology, in line with his prophetology, so on and so forth. The best example that we can give for this is an intertext.
That's what he messed up at right there. He edits, but y'all Quran literally say that you cannot change all our words. So that's a problem, bro. That is a problem. You can't change his words, but yet he say, if you're in doubt, go to the people who had the previous books. We got a big issue with that. And edit mean change. Edit and change is the same thing. If I take this video and edit it, it have been changed. Even if I take what I said right now and change, like edit some words that I said in my video, well, guess what? My words have been changed.
It's found in Surah Al-Hadid in comparison with the book of Matthew, where the author of the Quran mentions these details. That's number one.
Sorry, what chapter is that?
Surah Al-Hadid. Al-Hadid.
The number.
57.
Yeah,
57.
57. Right? Where we see these intertexts with the Quranic author, and this is backed by scholarship by Gabriel Said Reynolds. In his book, The Bible and the Quran, he specifically mentions that the author of the Quran is familiar with the biblical prophets, is familiar with the stories, right? And changes the prophetology according to what he believes is true. So because the author of the Quran consciously adds this material, we would say that is not an absolute confirmation, and that'd be like the basic response. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think that one, there's nowhere in the Quran that says that.
Okay.
There's nowhere in the Quran that it gives any such idea or implication of a partial confirmation. Over and over again, you see the Quran saying that it confirms the Torah and the Gospel. It confirms the Torah and the Gospel. It confirms what is with you, chapter 2, verse 41. It commands the Jews and the Christians to believe in the Quran because it confirms what they have with them. And so it wouldn't make sense that the Quran is saying, oh, well, actually, it's only confirming some of what you have, so believe in the Quran because it's in line with part of what you have. That just wouldn't follow. It just, I think, makes the problem worse.
I actually got a video that I posted before this that talk about that very topic, about it being partially confirming the scripture. Like it's good. It's really good. That is literally the new Islamic dilemma that we're talking about. Now, since they brought that up, well, guess what? Now they created a whole brand new Islamic dilemma.
That, saying that there's conscious edits would be saying that Muhammad is actually purposely creating the Islamic dilemma, you know? And so you have verses where, you know, it points to the previous scriptures as like the standard of truth on how you can know that the Quran is getting some of these stories correct. Chapter 10, verse 94, it says, if you're in doubt, then go and ask those who've been reading the scripture before you. Truly, the truth is coming to you from your Lord, so be not of those who doubt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Chapter 2, verse 85, it says, you know, talking about the Jews who are going against the Torah, right? Going against what they don't like, choosing what they like. It says, do you believe in part of the scripture and reject the rest? What is the recompense of those who do so among you except disgrace in this life, and then hereafter you get a severe torment. So you're going to go to hell if you believe in part of the scripture,
right?
The Quran says. So this idea of partial confirmation, I don't see it in the Quran.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a bigger issue that we have to focus on first is because obviously the prompt is the Quranic final revelation, is what a criteria for revelation would look like, irrespective of what we would take an interpretation of a particular verse to be. Because if we're going to sit here and argue about particular interpretations and this scholar says this, but this one says that about a particular verse, it's not really going to get anywhere. But if we can establish some sort of fundamental basis as to what a particular revelation looks like from God, or from specifically the Abrahamic God, as we're going to be discussing between the Bible and the Quran, I think it's going to be a lot more, you know, of a fruitful discussion. But I mean, obviously at the same time, when it comes to
Bro, dude, she got on Coco Chanel. They so flashy with their stuff now. They're like the new Muslims or something. Like this flashy show off. That's what I'm talking about with like Malik. He treat them like they're rap stars, and he's the CEO of a rap label or a record label or whatever. It's crazy. I just want to point it out because it's weird. I know it ain't got nothing to do with the debate, but yeah, let me stop, man, because I be feeling some type of way.
the Islamic dilemma, I think when it comes to this particular discussion, like I said, there are many different scholarly opinions, and those things can be taken out of context. They can be twisted into different ways, etc. But at the end of the day, if we agree that there is a majority opinion from the scholars who, from the beginning of Islam, took a position or held to a position where there was going to be a general confirmation, in the sense where for example, you have Ibn Abbas and other individuals who say things such as the Quran is a criteria over them. He says that the Bible and the Torah were corrupted. He says to the people, the Muslims specifically, he says, why is it that you read what they have when you have that which is already not corrupted, and it is clear, it is undistorted, and it is given to you by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and they don't read your scriptures.
What does Ibn Abbas say about the prior scriptures in the Hadith, though?
Yeah, he specifically says it's corrupted
What's
and
the Arabic?
distorted. He says there is tahrif, I believe.
Well, the thing is that the same Arabic word shows up in Surah 16:101 when Allah is talking about abrogation. So that means corruption.
What is the word in Arabic?
What is it? I think I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's like bidala, something like that.
Tabdil.
So I don't know the exact,
So
but
the
it's the
tabdil.
same word in 1601 is my point, though. So that's important because he's talking about abrogating. So if that word means that we've corrupted our scriptures, then Allah is saying that the Quran has been corrupted because when he changes something, it's because he's corrupting something.
Right, but-
So if you
yeah,
look at that, the most literal understanding is that they substituted the book of Allah, not that it's been corrupted.
Right, so I want to work backwards with 1094 to 85, specifically regarding the objection they gave. I don't believe they addressed the substance of conscious edits. So you mentioned specifically that the author of the Quran,
Conscious edit.
which you posit to be
Muhammad?
beautiful. Let's go with that. The author of the Quran purposefully goes against the previous scriptures. Would you agree that in that case, he specifically doesn't believe that it's revelation if he purposefully, knowingly changes revelation, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think he's going against the scriptures. Normally. I think he's hearing stories
beautiful.
and going against what he's hearing.
Amazing. So you're saying that there's an old tradition by the Jews and the Christians that he's listening to, and he doesn't believe that it's revelation or the Bible specifically.
Correct.
Right? So that wouldn't hold weight for two main reasons. The first reason is that we know that the author of the Quran is very familiar with the biblical text. I gave you the inference from Surah Al-Hadid, and I gave you also the fact that the author of the Quran parallels with stories, for example, Moses in the Exodus, of him taking out his hand, right? The Exodus account said that his hand was leprous.
That's different.
Right, yeah, I'm saying that there's two examples of conscious edits, right?
Okay.
And the second example, in the Quran, says that his hand was without disease. So the author of the Quran follows exactly to the T every story, part of the story, and then towards the end, he edits it. So because of that, and I give you the historical precedence, the scholarship precedence by Gabriel St. Reynolds, where he explicitly says that the author of the Quran is familiar with the prophetology, is familiar with the account within the Bible. So how do you do with that specifically?
So, go ahead, Bill. You want to?
Yeah. So can you quote that again? Who said this about?
Gabriel St. Reynolds.
Okay. And when was this?
He's a contemporary scholar.
Okay, very cool. So would you say that your scholarship throughout history has affirmed this idea of correcting the stories of the prophets?
Yes, we have, for example, Ibn Hazm, who's a classical scholar who quotes an ijma' of the early Muslims in his book Al-Fisal, where he explicitly mentions that we have heard of a group of Muslims from amongst the Muslims who did not believe in textual corruption. What this means is that the majority of Muslims wouldn't believe in textual corruption. However, the minority position would have been that obviously they don't believe that, but that's like a different position.
Yeah, so I actually really like the point you brought up about the conscious edits, okay? So for argument's sake, let's just say that the author of Quran is correcting the previous scripture.
Beautiful.
Okay, let's just say that. Specifically,
And he knows the previous scriptures.
I
sake of
think it's,
Okay.
yeah, for the sake of, well, actually, I would argue that, I'm not really sure what happened, but it's divine revelation, right? And so if Muhammad gets all these details correct, either way, whether he knew it or he didn't hear it, he's getting it from God. So it doesn't matter if he heard it somewhere else, right?
Yeah, but we're
for
talking from
argument's
like an
sake,
outside person looking in. They're not going to grant this thing.
oh, definitely not. But I'm saying,
Exactly.
so like that's your guys' position.
Yeah.
Is my understanding. And so because of that, all these details, especially of the prophets, have to be correcting what's wrong in the Torah. And you said conscious, right?
Yep.
And so with that being said, that means that your claim would have to be that someone, a Jew, went and changed the stories in the Torah.
A Jew or a group of Jews.
So
or a
was
Jew
it
would have
intentional or unintentionally changed?
Yeah, so it would depend on the context, right? But
So can we bring up some examples? I'll bring up some examples and you can tell me. Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
So for example, the story of, okay, even you just brought up Moses, right? Why is one leprous, one's not? That's like a very intentional, someone changed it, okay? Another example would be, this one actually strikes me a lot. So the story of Joseph, okay? There's many irreconcilable differences. So for example, Jacob's reaction to Joseph's quote unquote death, right? So in the Quran, Jacob's like, I have faith by Allah, he's alive. He doesn't say that, he says it implicitly at first, and then later on, after they're going back to Egypt, so this is years later, he's still like, no, I can smell Joseph. Go look for Joseph. Finally, when he finds out, he basically was like, I told you guys. I told you he was alive. Now, when you look at the Torah, so his reaction to the death is he goes, Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. And then years later in Egypt, he's like, don't take Benjamin. Joseph's already dead. He was torn to pieces. Later, finally, when he sees Joseph, he's still like, or he hears about Joseph, he's like, no, I don't believe it. So this is very intentionally changed because you can't just
change it in one place, you have to go and change it in like multiple other places.
Beautiful.
And so my idea is this. That's one mistake I just brought up, right?
Yeah, do you want to suggest that real quick?
Well, she's got to make a point. There's a point.
So the point is that there are these intentional changes, and that's just one difference I brought up, okay?
Beautiful.
But there's actually 944 differences just in the 98 verses of Surah Yusuf. Sorry, of the story of Joseph in Surah Yusuf.
Okay.
And so that is kind of crazy. And so my question is, what is the motivation of a Jew changing his, even changes his age, even changes how long it takes for them to come back? Just like there's water in the well in the Torah, there's no water in the pit. I mean, there's no water in the pit in the Torah, there's water in the pit in the Quran, like super random. I don't understand if it's like, is it prophecies of Muhammad they're trying to take out? No.
Right, so what you're
is it
saying
politics? Is it
right.
theological? Is it ethics?
You're saying that
So
if
like,
there's no motivation there, we can assume that the text is safe.
so my argument would just be Occam's razor. It's just the most simple argument, right?
Beautiful.
If it doesn't make sense and there's point, it's an argument from pointlessness. And
Amazing.
Yeah, but so the issue with that is going to be if we don't have any evidence, right, to suggest that there was some sort of corruption or some sort of change, historically speaking, right, then it would be the case that we could say, we could use Occam's razor, come to the simplistic understanding, given on the idea that we don't have any evidence, okay? However, even according to the Jewish traditions, we have individuals such as what they believed during the 5th century BCE. They believe Ibn Ezra, right, or individuals, not Ibn Ezra specifically, Ezra, the priest or the rabbi, yeah. He specifically was the one who recollected the entirety of the Torah for them, or the entirety of what they had up until then of the Old Testament specifically. And he was the one who did it alone. So this is something according to their traditions.
Do you accept this source?
I don't need to accept this source.
So I don't either.
Hold on. The point is that I'm showing is that there is certain things that occur historically where we could use them as some sort of evidence to negate the proposition.
Do you know when this was written? Sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it could, I'm not sure when specifically it's written. It comes within their oral tradition, though.
So this is post-Jesus. This is way
She wasn't referring to 4th Ezra. I know you're referring to that, but she wasn't referring to that.
Yeah,
She's
no.
referring to the Torah itself, like in 2 Kings 22 and 25. Like in 2 Kings 22, when it says that King Josiah found the book of the law, he found Deuteronomy, it lost it. And then later in 2 Kings 25, it says that when King Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the temple, he burned down everything. Everything was lost. And that's how we see Ezra and Nehemiah 8. When Ezra's reading the Torah, the Levites at the time, they have to interpret these laws for the people because they're not familiar with it. And that's how we see in verse 16 to 17 that they quote a law that hasn't been done since the time of Joshua. But I've heard you believe in documentary hypothesis. You don't think that the Pentateuch that we have, you don't.
No.
You don't
No
think
documentary
you think the Pentateuch that we have is the one from Moses wrote?
This is a shift. Let's
Yeah,
scratch
Well,
yeah,
that.
it's not a shift because she's asking how is it
Because that-
intentional and unintentional.
So I can.
My response
So I
to that-
reject, just real quick, I reject the documentary hypothesis.
So you think the Pentateuch
but
was written
even-
by Moses?
So I can address that, but first I want to finish this.
Hey guys, quick break from the show. If you're someone that actually enjoys
So while it's on this is perfect time to show this part of the video that I want to show y'all right quick, right? Because I'm gonna just show y'all this quick new Islamic dilemma, right? I'm gonna show y'all this. Bible.
Revelation is unreliable and has the revelation is unreliable and if Allah's previous revelation Quran affirms what is partially.
This is all right. So this is the part. Do this on my reaction video to this. This is really good. This is literally gonna debunk what they said. Man, this is so good. This is so. I think anyone of us
The Bible is
Muslim.
if the Bible is partially true and the Quran affirms what is partially true while consciously editing what is not true, how do we know that those conscious edits are going to be true if Allah's previous revelation is unreliable and has the possibility of being corrupted?
There we go. See that? Baked like cookies. They created a whole new Islamic dilemma. Created a whole new one. They ain't even know. Didn't even know. So many hoes. So now, let's get back to the video.
get that you brought. Okay, we're not talking about for Ezra.
Yeah.
Either way, I don't hold to this Jewish traditions, and even if we did,
But
that still
I wasn't
doesn't.
done with my point.
Okay,
She wasn't done with
for
her.
argument's sake,
She really
the Jewish
wasn't.
tradition is correct. For argument's sake, let's just say. So essentially, it was changed, but then that would be an accidental change. That would be them unintentionally trying to put it together and they get it wrong. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to look for the intentional changes that are in the Quran. I'm sorry, in the Torah. So I'll just give one example. Okay.
Do you mind if we just finish off with
Let's deal with this one. 'cause I want to hear their response.
Yeah, you're right.
Because I don't know why you're saying that it has to be specifically intentional. There could also be things which are done unintentionally, such as, for example, the reason why this even occurs, by the way, in the 5th century BCE is because of the Babylonian exile. I think, like you said, Nebuchadnezzar, he's the one who goes, he burns all the Torahs, etc., and the one who recollects it for them again is this individual named Ezra. Whether you accept or reject the tradition, that's different, right? What I'm saying is that you appeal to Occam's razor. You're saying that we have to go with the more simplistic understanding. However, the only, understanding that we could gather based off of the evidences, at least from that time period, is going to be that this is the tradition that they held to. Unless we have some sort of 5th century Torah or 5th century Pentateuch or anything of the sort that you could appeal to, and then by which obviously the appeal is going to be a little bit different. The evidence is going to be different. It would be skewed towards your favor in terms of Occam's razor.
Okay, so let me understand your argument real quick. So let's just, for argument's sake, let's just say in the, when would you say the last perfectly preserved Torah was then? If you had to go with this argument, like,
What do you mean? No, I'm not saying perfectly preserved.
So like,
Torah.
let's
I'm
just
saying,
say, when was the last
let me
yeah, go
let me
ahead.
just make sure. Okay. What I'm saying is, okay, if we're saying that there's a specific Torah in the 5th century BCE, okay, and it has XYZ detailed information.
Correct or
Okay.
incorrect?
Whether it's correct or incorrect, it's what
that
it is
matters.
specifically
Yeah,
that
it does
goes.
matter.
Sorry, one sec.
It really does
Whether
matter.
it goes against or for what the Quranic narrative is saying.
Yes.
Okay.
That matters a lot, because how can something be corrupted? It gotta be like a perfect Torah, right? So that have to matter. She's saying it don't matter, but it does matter if y'all saying it's being corrupted or if there was an accident.
What I'm saying is that your story, right, is that this Pentateuch that we have today, or this specific story in Genesis of Joseph, right, it has a particular narrative that goes against the Quranic narrative. Okay. Right. That's what you believe. Right. However, what I'm saying is that we don't have any evidence to suggest, right, that this story is the same as what would have been there prior to 5th century BCE.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you. So it would, if there was a correct Torah with all these details, also I only brought up Joseph, there are thousands of contradictions in all the stories of the prophets.
Right.
So let's just say there was a Torah at a point in time with all of those correct stories, right? Those stories that said that, for example, the Quran says there's 7 plagues. Every Torah, every corroboration of Torah says there's 10. Everyone knows this.
The Quran says 9.
So define plague, because plague is inflicted, right?
Okay.
Only 7 were inflicted upon Pharaoh.
Right.
2 other signs, like the hand and the snake, that's not a plague.
Okay.
That's why I said 7.
Okay.
So that's like huge, right? So at a certain point in time, there was a Torah that said there were 7 plagues. Okay, somewhere. And that would have been, first of all, that's already a really, really crazy claim. Fine. Because the Passover influences all of Jewish history. You have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You have the firstborn, death of the firstborn. You have the redemption of the firstborns. You have so many other things, okay? And so a Jew would have to have written all of these in. On accident? Absolutely not. It was intentional. So they would have to add in the Passover lamb. They have to add in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They would also have to change the fact that in the Quran, they were running away at night. And they changed it to be like Pharaoh's telling them, leave right now because my firstborn son just died. So they added all these things. In my head, I don't understand why they added it. But okay, let's just say from the 1400s, Moses, to the 5th century, okay?
BCE, yeah.
Okay, so that would be thousands and thousands of irreconcilable differences. Corruption. You can agree with that. So, or until like, I guess the 250s BC, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls come in. But suddenly, from 1400s to 250 BC and onwards, the corruption stops. It just stops. Like maybe there's Scrabble errors here, maybe there's some like, fragments, we lost some things, but the actual irreconcilable contradictions of the prophets, it just stops. So that's your argument. That from 1400s to 250 BC, thousands of contradictions, suddenly 250s BC comes along, and then from 250 BC to 2026 today, it's just, they're not contradicting in the same way, and the corruption stops. So that's your argument, is my understanding.
Okay, but that's not even correct to even say that to begin with, because we know that we have the Masoretic, for example, that comes later on, and it still contradicts Dead Sea Scrolls, Greek
In the
Septuagint,
same way
etc.
that the Quran's version of the Torah?
The whole point is that there are still contradictions. Like, for example, in the Greek Septuagint, we know that it contradicts, or I would rather say that there is more of a difference in regards to the I am narrative that's in Exodus 3, where one would be suggested towards the idea that, you know, obviously in the Hebrew, it says, I am that I am, go tell them that I am has sent you.
Okay.
But when you go to the Greek, it says, tell them that the one being has sent you. Right.
Even if I grant that, I'm not talking about a theological thing. Like, if there's a theological change, I can be like, okay, I can see why maybe someone did that because they have a theological motive.
Changes.
So intentional changes, but with no theological, prophetic, political, or ethical motive at all.
Okay,
because there's thousands of these.
She's saying that these changes can't be unintentional.
Yeah,
they're on purpose, but also they don't have any motive.
There's no reason.
Right.
So what would be the reason
like
for these details?
The thing is, this argument is going to be like mainly abductive. Right, so it's working based on two hypotheses. You're saying that, look, we have this case where we have these changes, but seemingly there is no motivation behind the changes, and therefore we can assume that there was no reason to change it, and therefore it was reliable. Therefore, the Quranic account would be wrong. That's the stillman of the argument you guys are saying. The only issue is just because we're not able to, we don't have epistemic access to the sort of motivation, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I'll give an example. When it comes to historicity, there's an example known as the principle of embarrassment. Right? So we're looking at a text. If there's something that's seemingly embarrassing that's in the text, the author would have intended by the author, we can assume that it's not corrupted. Thing is, within the scholarship, they don't take the principle of embarrassment by itself to be feasible. Why? Because we don't know what would have been embarrassing at that time to be able to determine whether or not the author would have been embarrassed to include it or not.
That's good, yeah.
With the example that you have, just because we don't have access to the motivation doesn't mean that there couldn't have been some sort of motivation behind it, and therefore the argument is simply going to be like very like low probability.
But just go back to the main argument. It's about Occam's razor at this point now. Now we have to posit all these intentional changes.
Yeah,
and it's just an easier explanation to shave all it off and just say the Quran just made errors from here.
Yeah,
oral
that wouldn't
traditions.
follow because we're not accounting in infallibility and fallibility of writers. So,
but that's assuming your conclusion.
No, because I'm actually making an argument. What I'm saying is I'm lowering her probability by saying that there is other explanations that require less presuppositions, such as that the authors or the collectors are going to be fallible, and therefore we still expect these same changes. My explanation requires less presupposition, and therefore under Occam's razor, my explanation would follow to be better.
So how does if you're saying they're fallible, so therefore they're just making.
Bro, I can't, his accent is so deep, I can't understand him, low key. I ain't even gonna lie. Like, his accent is so rich and his voice is deep. I can't understand some of the stuff he's saying. I'm gonna be real. So I'm like, I'm not, yeah.
Mistakes.
Right.
That's unintentional mistakes, right?
Right.
So they're unintentionally going into all of these specific details, making these differences on accident over and over and over and over again that has a continuity with with the first mistake and the second mistake and the third mistake and the fifth and sixth and seventh and 10th mistake all make one consistent story, but it disagrees with the Quran, so therefore
when you say consistent, I don't really.
Yeah, that is just crazy, bro. That is wow. How can you unmistakenly make unintentionally make mistakes over and over and over and over again? That just don't make sense. That don't make sense at all.
What that means, because if you're simply saying that there's mistakes,
So
and they don't contradict, well, yeah, of course there can be scribal mistakes and they don't contradict and they can build it all the time.
Do you think the Passover was a scribal mistake?
What do you mean?
Do you think the Passover is a scribal mistake?
No, I believe it's intentional actually. Because I believe that this specific example, it has a financial motivation, specifically regarding to the rabbis and the priests. They would have wanted to have this sort of sacrificial system implemented because they would obviously influence financial gain. So that can be intentionally explained away. So that's different.
How?
Okay. Even if we grant that.
I just explained it.
Even if we grant that, then we can throw that out. Do you know the story of Talut in the Quran? So Talut, Saul, right? He's about to go to an army to fight Goliath, and then he tests his army with a river. He says, if you drink from the hollow of your hands, you're with me. If not, you're not. And then he and his army charges at Goliath's army, and then it says David kills Goliath. Right. So anyone who has read the Torah, any copy, manuscript of the Torah, any corroboration of the Torah story of Saul, in any part of the world, they would know that is completely just divergent.
So that's like a different example. Okay.
Exactly. Now, but it's not just different, it's mixed. So it's mixed with this character in the book of Judges, right? That is way before Saul. And that's his story with the testing the army with the river. Okay? So anyone who reads the Torah is gonna know this. And the Tanakh in that sense. But the idea here is that what you have to say is that a Jew, because that's on accident, that's on purpose. A Jew did this. A Jew made up the story of Gideon, completely made it up, and then rewrote the story of Saul.
Okay.
So again, what does the water have to do with any type of motive, theological, political, etc.?
So you guys keep kind of like sticking to the point of that it's either the scribe is intentionally altering it or a scribe unintentionally just fallibly made an error. But
no, it's all intentional.
If you can just the God logic specifically made some instances where you said it was unintentional.
No. We were trying to show you that for it to be unintentional would be really like
Okay,
very
no sense.
not
but
probable.
the thing is, earlier y'all were granting for the sake of the argument the Jewish tradition, and that Jewish tradition, like it says in, we
rejected that.
Earlier you granted.
Well, we do reject it, but for the sake of argument.
I'm just.
So that means building.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So you guys are kind of ignoring the fact that in 2 Kings 25, King Nebuchadnezzar burned down everything of the Torah, and that Torah was lost for 70 years. So they didn't have any Torah manuscripts for over 70 years, like Jeremiah says that they were in exile for 70 years. So they didn't have any Torah manuscript whatsoever for 70 years. Hold on. And then furthermore, we see that when Ezra did revise this Torah and redact it together, he has laws that were not found for over 1,000 years, like it says in Nehemiah 8:16-17, that they started following festivals and laws that were not done since the days of Joshua. So for over 1,000 years, there isn't a single Torah document that ever had this law, but now you see that Ezra's revision has this law in it. So it's not that every single change is intentional from a scribe. They didn't have any Torah for 70 years. Now you're just expecting us to, someone who doesn't have a Torah for 70 years, to just recompile that and have a perfect Torah.
I disagree with that, but you got away from our point.
Right.
So this is why we keep saying like that's kind of a shift. Now, number one, Nebuchadnezzar is contemporary with Daniel, right? Daniel had a Torah. In Daniel 9, he actually quotes from and he references it, the Torah that he has and the word of Jeremiah that he appeals to understand that this is the time where God's supposed to free the people from Babylon.
Hey, quick break from the show. I want to give a big shout out to
God logic nipped that in the bud real quick.
But to her point, she's talking about specific examples where you guys have to reconcile, if you're going to say this is corruption, why and how? Because there's no motive, there's no intention, or it's intentional because these changes are consistent and they're building up on these era after era after era after era. They're building a narrative off of the first mistake. So they're doing this over and over and over again. This isn't intentional. They're changing ages, reactions. These aren't accidents. So
that's why I said specifically regarding your point. So number one, when you say that it's something consistent or they're building on something consistent, are you merely saying, and this is rhetorical, are you merely saying that this we don't see any contradictions, therefore the story can be reconciled, and therefore we can? No. So he's not saying that?
No, he is saying that it can't be reconciled.
It can't be reconciled.
Yeah,
No, we're not talking about the Quran at this point. We're talking about the stories in the Bible. That's the point that you're building on. That we see these authors or these scribes, they're building on a narrative, right? That's what you're saying. And you're saying that as long as they don't contradict, we can assume that they're building on a narrative. Well, I can simply grant you that, hey, even if there's no contradictions per se, doesn't mean that the specific narrative that they're all in on, that they're building upon. It simply means that the story doesn't contradict. That's number one. And number two, I'm gonna get to the second point that he made regarding the intention, whether it's intentional or no, whether we have epistemic access. I already responded to this. Just because we don't have epistemic access to the justification behind a specific scribe doing this, doesn't mean that there couldn't have been a reason. The same thing with the principle of embarrassment. You guys have to show me how is that any different from the principle of embarrassment being a very weak historical critique to be used to determine whether something is historical or not.
Because you're saying that that's weak if that's the only thing that's used. This isn't. We're not using the principle of embarrassment.
No, I'm not talking about principle of embarrassment. I'm talking about the specific inference that if there is no motivation, therefore we can assume the text to be reliable. So no, I'm not granting that inference.
It's probable. Do you think it's probable?
Good. So you're arguing from induction, right? You're arguing for probability?
Sure.
Okay, good. We can lower that probability, and as long as we get it below 51%, then the argument doesn't follow anymore. And we can show that as long as your explanation and my explanation, if the probability of both add up to 1, you have to show me why yours is more probable than mine. And I'm showing that your standard of just saying, hey, just because we don't know the motivation, right? Doesn't mean that there is no motivation. It just doesn't follow. You have to justify that premise. But give me the reason to believe that, hey, we know from the data available that there couldn't have been a justification.
Let me clarify something. So there's only two types of changes: intentional and unintentional.
Yep, we agree with that.
There are thousands of intentional changes in the Torah, according to you guys, which requires an intention.
Yep.
But I'm not going to list all thousands of these out, but I guarantee you, if we do begin,
There's
and
no
if we
intention
even
behind
throw in, throw out the Passover.
That's the burden.
Throw out the Passover.
That's the burden of
You
proof.
said motivation. You said you don't have access to the motivation.
Right.
That goes back to our point about Occam's razor. Now you have to posit one assumption for every single one of those thousands of changes. This is assumption upon assumption upon assumption. It is a massive violation of Occam's razor now.
Right, and that would assume, because what we're saying is that we're lowering the probability of that. Occam's razor by itself, I would say that's a good metric for inductive arguments. Like mostly abduction, where you're arguing for two hypotheses, under each evidence expected of each hypothesis, then you can argue for that. She's saying that's from induction, probability. So you guys are going against each other at this point. Right?
No,
So
you're not
explain to me,
understanding.
why should we grant,
There you go,
from
twisting stuff.
from a probabilistic point of view, that there couldn't have been an intention, therefore it's not motivated.
Yeah, we're definitely going in circles here. So let me bring up
evidence.
let me bring up Ibn Kathir. What do you think about Ibn Kathir's idea of the stories of the prophets in the Torah?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I brought up Saul, right?
Right.
Again, completely contradicting. First of all, I don't know if you guys
I don't know what Ibn Kathir has to do with the Quran and...
Yeah, so he makes a commentary on verse 256, because 246 to 252 is a story of Saul, and completely contradicting the Torah's version, right? And then on a commentary, to wrap up this, the verse goes, you didn't know, sorry, deeds are truly, I can't quote it, but it basically says, this is a story revealed to you now, and you are a prophet. Okay, it says something to this degree. Ibn Kathir is commentating on this, and he says, and he's in the 13th century, right, or 14th.
Yeah, he's classical.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so this is what he says verbatim. He says, this story, talking about Talud, Saul, conforms to the exact manner that they have in their divine books today. They being Israel, being Israel.
So you're saying that...
So that's what, yeah. So what do you think about what he thinks about that? And then Imam al-Razi, he says, al-Razi,
Okay.
he says that same verse. He says there are no differences at all.
You want to go with that?
There are no differences at all between the Torah's account and the Quran's account of this story of Saul and technically Gideon. But so would you just throw both those out the window?
Okay. So it's like I said initially when I first started, right?
Do you though? Like, would you have to reject that? Those tafsir?
I'm getting to it. Yeah,
Okay.
we don't have to accept any particular tafsir or anything of the sort, right? Like I said, majority opinion is that these scriptures were corrupted, though there are still certain scholars that held to different positions for a number of different reasons, whether it be because they may have studied it more, whether it be because they learned it from somebody else that was their teacher, et cetera, right? But the point is that if we take the position of corruption, because the whole point right now that you guys are trying to make is about the Islamic dilemma and whether or not the Quran, is saying that the prior scriptures are corrupted, not corrupted, et cetera. So we're trying to go based off of interpretation, where you guys would try, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are trying to posit absolute confirmation, yes?
Well, that's what the Quran says. It
Well,
never
asking,
qualifies.
That's not included.
But for the
All it says is confirmation, right?
for the sake of argument, she's
I'm
granting.
just making sure I know what you guys' position is on it. Okay. Neither does it say absolute, nor does it say general. Okay. So the position, we have two positions now. Either it's the case that the Quran wholeheartedly, absolutely affirms everything that comes from the prior scripture. Okay. Or it's the case that there is some sort of motivation or intention that we find within the Quran and the Quranic author's writing style or anything of the sort, such that we would be able to posit the other position, which is the case, right? For example, the crucifixion narrative, for example, the Exodus narrative that he mentioned, for example, the Saul narrative that you're mentioning. There are different, even the Joseph example as well. And I think that there are different ones that are being highlighted within the Quran that you guys keep indicating, to the point where you're actually going against the idea of absolute confirmation that you guys are trying to, presuppose onto it. Go ahead.
So there's two things. One, thank you for acknowledging that there are scholars within early Islam that did hold to complete confirmation, right? That the scriptures were not textually corrupted, but maybe just misinterpreted, right? That's it's really important. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Okay. We find it about like 2nd, 3rd century of Islam. It's not any earlier than that.
Okay, well, no worries. So, but we do have scholars that say that hold that position.
Who?
Right? This is huge. Bukhari is one of them.
What's the reference for that?
Ibn Qayyim. Ibn Qayyim.
Ibn Qayyim.
Yeah, Ibn Qayyim. He.
What was the reference?
Ibn Qayyim, and his,
that's the author. That's the
yeah, I
name.
know. I forget the book of the name of the book, but yeah, I
Page
can
number,
I can put
anything?
it on the screen. I can put it on the screen. When we like clip this, I can send it to you.
We'll put it up.
But yeah, trust me.
We'll
just
fact check
Yeah,
it.
it's Ibn Qayyim because Ibn Qayyim is a contemporary of Ibn Kathir. They both studied under Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, I don't remember the exact name of the book. I think it started with a B though, but it's an Arabic word. I don't remember Arabic words, bro. You know what I'm saying? So you know, my bad, man, my bad.
You're good, bro.
Okay, thank you, man. Have mercy on me. So you got Ibn Qayyim, right? He references Bukhari's position in that that the scriptures were not textually corrupted, but they were only misinterpreted.
See, this whole thing could have went well. You see, they laughing and stuff. This whole thing could have went well, but then they go and do some slimy stuff before the video drop. This what happen when you're impatient. You know, I know this time that don't have too much to do with the debate, but I just wanted to point that out. Like, this could have been a cool little debate.
He goes by other positions. He mentions other groups that also held it. He didn't name them specifically.
Okay.
One other guy he mentioned was Al-Razi. He also mentions.
When is Al-Razi?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Thing with Ar-Razi though is that Ar-Razi usually is just giving commentary most of the time when it comes to Bukhari's position.
Yeah. So
just real quick, Red. So
probably
you would
gonna
have to
clip
this is
that or
why
whatever.
references and such are important, right? Because we would have to know what specifically Ar-Razi is talking about, because he could just simply be commentating, such like, for example, you're bringing up Ibn Qayyim regarding Bukhari and so on. We would have to know specifically what's being said and whether or not he's giving his own position or not.
I can tell you what they're saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So they're commentating on corruption of the scripture, or whether or not they're corrupted or not. Al-Razi talks about how they're not corrupted. And matter of fact, he makes the point that it's a silly argument because what about all of the scriptures all across the world? You cannot, you would have to say that they're universally corrupted. That would be his position. He says that that's silly. He goes and he says that groups, Ibn Qayyim says that the groups that believe in textual preservation of the previous scriptures, he says that they used verses like chapter 6, verse 115, where it says
Did they use the 94?
Huh?
Did they use the 94?
No, not them. See, if they knew me, they would have used it.
Go ahead.
But they didn't use the 94. But they did.
They seem like they was doing well, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, hold on. I'm getting caught. But anyway, we got to stop right there because I got to get ready. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section, because this was a very this is something, and we're gonna try to catch the rest of this probably around sometime later today. But we'll try to catch the rest of this. We may do this on a live. So with that being said, man, I hope y'all have a blessed day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate all the support out there. And yeah, with that being said, man, I'm out.